Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Standards Committee. So, the induction loop is now operative. Members and officers, please remember to switch your microphones on and speak directly into the microphone and switch it off after speaking. Reporting officers using Team, please switch cameras on when addressing the committee. We don't have anyone tonight, do we? No. Please use the hands up icon to indicate questions or comments. I'll invite to speak. This meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public, and a recording of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Any private items on the agenda, the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There may be a short delay. So, have we any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Jay Hussain.
So we have minutes of the 8th of September meeting. Has everyone reviewed the minutes? Are there any questions or comments? Yes.
Okay, on page 8, paragraph 21, fourth paragraph down. The meeting in the middle of that paragraph is dated 24 January 21, which would have been a date in the past. Unlikely to have been the correct date, agreed.
Thank you. It should be, it should be 2023. Thank you. Any other queries? No? Are we happy to sign those minutes for the 8th? Great. And then we have minutes for the meeting of the 23rd of May 2023. Do we have any questions or comments on those minutes? No. So happy to sign them as an accurate record? Perfect. Okay. So, Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act.
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Perfect. So do we have any disclosures of interest? No. Okay. And any urgent business?
Again, none, Chair.
Perfect. So let's move on to the reports. So we have the draft annual report from the Chair of Standards Committee, and I will pass that over to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to present the report of the former Chair of Standards Committee, Samira Salim, for the municipal year 2022-23. The report is in its usual format. It starts with setting out the membership of the committee during the year and those who chaired and vice chaired it. Councillor Samira Salim as was, and Councillor Amy Nichols. The report covers a number of items. It starts with dealing with the attendance of members at committees, and that is set out in Appendix 1 to the report. It then goes on to cover the complaints against members that were dealt with during the year, and it makes the point that 2 of those complaints went through the formal process. 1 was recently closed and was not upheld, and the other is the subject of a meeting of the local adjudication panel later this month. It then goes on to acknowledge the role of the independent members of Standards Committee in supporting the work of the committee during the year in monitoring meetings of full council. We're always pleased to see them there, and I think their contribution to maintaining the high standards of debate that we enjoy in our council meetings has been invaluable. The report then touches on member training, and the details of that are set out at appendices B1 to B4 of the report, covering the different types of training that members are expected to undertake, whether it be mandatory training, committee specific training, or merely attending briefings. The report is customarily taken for approval at full council, subject to your approval of it. And the expectation is that we will take this report to the meeting of full council on the 26th of September. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. So do we have any questions, David?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just to say, if the committee gets around to discussing the details of complaints against members, there is one complaint in there that is, if it is to be discussed in detail, I would need to declare an interest and leave.
Very much. Councillor Burnett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 13, paragraph 7, at the end it says, where is it? Included within the revised constitution that was approved by full council at its meeting held on the 15th of November 2023. We've not reached November yet. We're still feeling the rays of summer. So I think that's 2022. Yeah, and the second thing I just wanted clarification on paragraph 8. And the committee agreed to take no further action to implement the LGA model code of conduct until after the borough election on May 20. Are we going to talk about that today? Because on the schemes of work, there's no work plan forward. So when are we going to talk about implementing the LGA model code of conduct, please? Thank you.
That could be something that could be programmed in for the next meeting, Chair.
I think that seems appropriate. Do we have any further? Paula first.
Yeah, no, just a mathematical. Page 22. Councillor Petts. The number of meetings he should have attended, the addition there is quite incorrect because it brings down his percentage very badly.
Yeah, I'm afraid last year was a very bad year for our family. And as a consequence, it did interrupt a lot of activities, including with the council as well. So for that, I apologise, but I think we would all agree family comes first.
Jess, I think what the point is that the calculations in the number of meetings possible is very wrong. That it's saying that you possibly could have attended much more than is actually possible because there aren't that many meetings. And I think that seems to be a consistent thing of the number under the number of meetings column doesn't add up in a few of the boxes. Mine is also wrong.
If you look at previous years, you'll find that I'm up in the 80%. So, you know, it's
yeah.
Yeah, I think the point, Councillor Petts, is that you've actually attended 16 out of a possible 21 meetings. That is a very laudable percentage.
Yeah.
So it is the figures are wrong. It's not your attendance that's wrong.
Oh.
We will go through with a fine-toothed comb and put the figures right. No, I think you represented your constituents admirably, considering.
I'm an accountant, so these figures jump out at me, sorry.
Was there anything further? No, no, just can we look at the numbers? Right, Councillor Steer. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Amy, it's worth mentioning the figure for Alan Skeppelhorn is quite low, but during that year, he spent 8 months in hospital with COVID and came about as close to death as anybody dares to get. It's good to see that he's back in full action now.
Mark, I wonder for the record if that could be added into the attendance, that special was added to.
Yes, Chair, I will make specific reference to it in the Chair's report.
Councillor Steer?
Yeah, sorry. Obviously, I'm a new member of the committee. I'm not too clear why attendance of members is a matter for the Standards Board. Sorry, just to add to that, obviously we've had some personal circumstances here, and we've had a member who has actually previously died of COVID and other members who've suffered.
This is historical, the reason why. And I'm to blame for it, because for many years I wrote these reports. And I thought there was nowhere where, in fact, the attendance of the members is in the public domain, particularly in some sort of comprehensible form. And that seemed to me, from a standards point of view, it was something which because we are here to monitor the effectiveness of councillors, it had to go somewhere, and it seemed to me perfectly reasonable to put it there. Ever since it's been in there, it's raised all sorts of questions about, well, I remember going to this meeting, I remember going to that meeting, all the rest of it. So it's a bit of a minefield, but it has to go somewhere. So that I'm to blame for it from, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I've got some sympathy with Francis's questioning this. I don't have any objection to my attendance at meetings being publicised. I don't have any objection to it being monitored. The fact is that of the total work that I do as a councillor, on behalf of my constituents and on behalf of the council, attendance at meetings is only about 10%. I just think if we are going to publish these figures, then there ought to be a statement that somehow makes it clear that for most councillors, most of the work they put in is outside of meetings. Because I believe that is, it's certainly true of me, but I believe it's probably true of most councillors. And it is very misleading if all you do is prevent the statistics, because there's nothing more misleading than statistics without the background information.
Chair, that fact is acknowledged at paragraph 11 of the Chair's report, which does mention that this is only one measure of the enormous amount of activity that members undertake outside of formal committee meetings.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
I totally agree with Councillor Franks. This seems a bit of a crude sort of measure with no explanation. There's nowhere where members can make an explanation of their attendance record on it. It's just very crude figures. and it'd be nice if they properly added up as well. I don't know whether we might kind of try and revisit it, Chair, and see if we can tweak it a bit, because statistics are, you know, what they are, but there's circumstances also involved.
Yeah, this is something that we've spoken many times about in this committee over the years that I've been on it, especially how...
Sorry, I'm new.
No, it's absolutely... Especially how the figures are added up with meetings like Overview and Scrutiny Committee that is just there to ratify a decision that many members would not attend, therefore bringing down the full total figure. Is there, Mark, potential to review how we report these figures? And
I suggest, Chair, you put it on the work programme for
Yes.
the next meeting and have a, you know, thoroughly thrash it out. The one thing that I would suggest is that it's probably not going to be practical to ask every member to give an account of their personal circumstances to reflect why their percentage is a particular percentage. So it almost comes down to the point of, well, do you report them or do you not?
what are they in the correct format?
Well, we've acknowledged that the format has some errors in it. You know, those are errors. They will be put right. But the principle, I think, is more fundamental than that.
Okay, thank you. No, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I just if we're going to put this on the work programme, I think it would be good to look at other local authorities to get best practice. And it might be good in us reviewing it, what we say the minimum standard is, because there's a minimum requirement on councils as to their attendance, and maybe a lot of people, I don't even think where the minimum is, and everybody exceeds that. So I think we need to say, make it clear, as this is a public document, what's the minimum requirement by law, if in making the community better aware of what we do. And maybe in the report next time, the bit that the monitoring officer has said about we doing things outside, it's bolded or it's italic, so it just stands out in the paper clearer, based on the thing that Councillor Steers has said and Councillor Franks. But I think we should look at best practice, and it's providing some context. It's better than nothing. We're not going to get everything right, because we have, this is, and it might have been also good in the report to say something about the residue of COVID, because we were coming through COVID and we still got COVID around and people are still getting COVID. So maybe a note to the report stating about the impact of COVID to members, because we are individuals and humans like everybody else, and maybe going forward, we just need to put a note to the report just to say that, because we are going to be affected by that, as Councillor Frank said with Councillor Skeppelhorn. But just thinking about how do we best reflect and improve the report. So I think the LGA would be a good place to see what other local authorities are doing. I hope that's agreeable to everybody moving forward. Thanks.
Mark, be able to look into how other councils report theirs and put that into the...
If that's the committee's wish, yes, of course.
Yeah, sure. Councillor Miller?
So whilst I agree it's not the best metrics to measure the effectiveness of a councillor, I'm sure the local residents are aware of how active their councillors are within the local area. So a councillor could have very poor numbers, but they're very active, as Councillor Franks has said, then their local residents aren't going to hold it against them. But equally, if they're not in their community and these figures show they're not turning up for meetings, then it does help to point out poor councillors, in my view.
I agree. I do think it's an important metric that we do report on those figures. Do we have any further questions or comments on this report? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to request that it references the fact that the meetings have to be attended in person by law, because I think the phrase attending a meeting now in common parlance just means firing up a laptop and jumping on MS Teams. So, you know, people might think, well, actually, you know, attendance could be higher if people could attend from home, but it's just worth stating that they can't due to a legal requirement.
Mark, is that potentially something we can add a line about into the report?
Yes, I think so, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else? No? Okay, are we happy to agree the report with those amendments? That is what we're asking for, right? I can check what the recommendation is. Yes. Right, so the recommendation is to approve the former chair's annual report for the 2022-23 municipal year, and that the report go to full council for its consideration at the meeting held on the 26th of September. So with those amendments, are we happy to approve the report? Yes, I'll take no objections to be yes. Right. So we are on the operation of the council's whistleblowing policy.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the normal annual report on how the council's whistleblowing policy has operated over the previous year. 6 complaints were received during the 22-23 municipal year. 1 related to a school, 2 related to social care establishments, and the remaining 3 to staffing issues within the council itself. The complaint relating to the school was, following consultation with schools HR, referred to the Board of Governors of the school concerned, and that is the usual approach if that is the advice given by schools HR. There was an allegation relating to safeguarding that was considered after investigation to be unsubstantiated, and a further allegation of abuse of authority was dealt with informally, but was not considered sufficiently serious to merit formal action. The complaints relating to social care related to external providers and were referred to the relevant corporate or service director for further investigation. 1 complaint was not substantiated, whilst the second complaint, which was already known to the adult safeguarding team, resulted in members of the provider's staff being disciplined and retrained. The complaints against members of staff were in essence related to abuse of authority and in particular allegations of bullying. 2 of the complaints were not upheld, 1 for lack of evidence and the other because the matter had previously been dealt with and resolved by management. The 3rd complaint was resolved by the employee voluntarily leaving the council's service following an investigation. In accordance with the council's constitution, I have reported this previously to Audit and Governance Committee, who are required to consider general issues and statistics in relation to the council's corporate whistleblowing policy, and to make recommendations to this committee for developments of the policy where appropriate. At its meeting on the 20th of July this year, Audit and Governance took the view that they were satisfied with the operation of the policy and therefore make no recommendations to you in regard to the development of that policy.
Thank you, Mark. So let's start with questions. Do you have any questions on the whistleblowing report? Okay, any comments? No? Okay, well, this report is simply an update to note. So we are recommended to note the report. Is everyone happy to note the report? Yes, lovely. Right, so it's going to be a nice quick meeting. We are on the work programme. So,
yep, thank you, Chair. I think the committee's already sort of dealt with this item as we've gone through the meeting, because your work programme for the next meeting was somewhat scant, and now you have filled it up with lovely items for us to consider. So as I recall, Chair, we have further consideration of whether or not to adopt the LGA model code of conduct, and a review of whether or not we continue to publish attendance figures as part of the Chair's annual report.
yes, and the best practice of how that's reported.
Indeed, and you may wish to ask members of the committee, Chair, if there are any other items that they think should go onto that meeting or a future meeting of the committee.
Paula. Oh, okay, John Best.
Thank you. There is some concern amongst a number of authorities which I have connection with, that's the proposal to upgrade and amend in particular the sanctions regime, which is, as was said earlier on by the monitoring officer, is fairly weak. And there's proposals went out to consultation 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was, for amending those. It seems to have got stuck, and there's no real urgency now within government to progress it. A number of the other authorities with which I'm in contact have said, well, they will try and request their members of parliament to raise the issue in some way. And I don't know whether, in fact, it might be worth looking at that as a possibility for this authority, if you're interested in particularly getting the government to move on the point. If you're not, then so be it. But it might be either something which can be done before then, or it's something which you might want to discuss at the next meeting and therefore put it in within the work programme, or indeed can consider whether there is any result at that point. If that makes any sense.
Mark? Oh, Councillor Franks.
Yeah, I thank you, John, for raising that. It's been a concern for many of us for far too long. We have the monitoring officer with us, so whether his knowledge of the Constitution is sufficiently detailed to answer this, I'm really not sure. But what I don't know whether it is within the remit of this committee to actually approach the town's 2 MPs and its 3rd parliamentarian and ask them to ask appropriate questions or do whatever is within their power to ensure that this is not simply ignored, that is brought forward. If it's not within the remit of this committee to do that, then I presume it is within the remit of this committee to pass a resolution requesting that full council does it.
Yes, Chair. I I would be uncomfortable with this committee taking such action unilaterally. I think a recommendation from this committee to full council as a resolution of full council would be the appropriate proceed. Alternatively, a member who feels strongly about this could bring it as a motion to full council.
I mean, I'm not averse to a member producing a motion, but I just think the whole thing looks stronger, looks a lot more as though it's coming from all parties on the council if it's a resolution from this committee rather than from one individual member. If one individual member is the only way to do it, then I'm quite happy to do that. But I prefer to make it look very much as though it's a position of all three parties.
Yes, I don't suggest it as the only way to do it, Chair. It is one way of doing it, but another way would be a resolution of this committee as a reference to full council.
So propose.
Sorry, David, are you proposing a resolution of the committee to go to full council?
I'm happy to second that if it's
quite happy to leave the drafting detail to the monitoring officer.
Chair, I think we need to have debated them before we reach a resolution on it. And I understood that this was a suggestion for a discussion at a future meeting of the committee.
Yes. That is where I was leaning.
We have to decide what the form of that resolution should be and what we should be recommending full council to press our MPs to ask for of the government in terms of specific sanctions.
If we were to do a resolution of this committee, that would not be till the March meeting, so that's still a number of months away. Is that something people would be minded to want to add to the work programme for that March meeting?
When's the next meeting?
21st of March. So not for a number of months. There's obviously assessment panels between that. Sorry? Yes, we could. We could schedule in an additional meeting just to discuss this one item.
I think it's been ignored and swept under the carpet for long enough. It may be a better way forward if I discuss with the other two group leaders a joint motion signed by three appropriate members. I'm quite happy to undertake that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good way forward. Also, informally, the three group members could write to the two MPs, particularly as we have the Shadow Minister for Local Government as one of them.
So, okay. Right. So we're not adding that to the March work programme, I think is the resolution there. I'm going to take it as a motion. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Paula Brennan.
Yeah, just I don't know if they're appropriate for the work programme, but I'll just mention them anyway. We have, I think, a lot of new faces in this room tonight for this committee. And there's a couple of things that we've had some debate earlier about the chair's report. Obviously, you, Councillor Nichols, the report next year is going to be yours for the first time. And it's maybe at some point it could be discussed as to what the members of this brand new panel might want included, if there's any changes that need to be made to it that you can consider. And the other thing, something we did in the past, which I thought was really useful, is we did some training in actual local assessment panel situations that might arise, because I'm guessing that a lot of people here have never attended a local assessment panel, and just to give them some food for thought as to maybe things they might need to consider that, due to not having done one before, could get missed if we didn't have people with experience in the room. So This was done very successfully in the past and did help past members. So just a suggestion.
Absolutely. I remember we did training a couple of years ago. I think, Mark, you led some, didn't you? Yes. Is that something we potentially could schedule in?
By all means, Chair, yes.
Okay.
We've usually done it in a sort of workshop format,
Yes.
outside of the formal business of the committee. So if members are interested in that, then I'm certainly happy to arrange it.
Oh, I've not got my mic on. That seems to be a consensus. If we could add that onto the wider agenda, not so much for the work programme, but for training. Anything further that people would be interested in adding to the work? Oh, go ahead.
Just extending Paula's point, can I put in a request that training really focuses on the limited scope of the local assessment panel? Because I remember when we did the training before, we had an assessment panel and it was really useful because everybody came along knowing that it wasn't to discuss was it right, should we upheld, etc. It was purely just to focus that conversation on the very, very narrow scope of the meeting, which is the allegation against the code of conduct. That's it, and it avoids a lot of time wasting, I think, at assessment panels, if that's clear to everybody.
Bennett?
Can I just, sorry, can I just suggest when the training is done, it's not just talked and delivered, there's a couple of case studies and people could work in a group to, taking the point that my colleagues made, where they would scope, because nothing beats experience. If you were in a scenario, how would those on that panel deal with it? So it just keeps the brain engaged and one doesn't switch off. I'm just suggesting, for me, learning is about the practicalities of doing.
I'm the same, and if I remember correctly, last time that is very much what we did. We did interactive.
It might have been included in the training. I don't know, but I'm just, for my learning, I need that.
I think you did them based on Coronation Street.
It cannot, indeed, it cannot be done any other way, Chair. It has to be done that way.
Absolutely. Let's get that training planned in. Anything further for the work programme? No? Okay. So with those additions, that is today's business. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming. And that's been a nice quick meeting.